It is Thursday night. It is 8 p.m. Central. It is actually Thanksgiving night tide here on the YouTube and podcast homes for BamaOnline.com. Travis Reier along with Clint Lamb to get you going on this Thanksgiving night. We'll have Jimmy Stein along with us coming up in about, 15 minutes or so. We'll check in with Jimmy. We'll go around the table with the three of us till about 8:30, and then Jimmy and myself will wrap things up from about 8:30 to 8:45. You're more than welcome to jump in with your comments and thoughts as we get ready for Alabama and Auburn. The Iron Bowl set to kick off one more time Saturday afternoon, 2:30 Central. CBS. And boy, Clint, I got to start with the Thanksgiving Day update. How many plates? Do you have a plate count for me at this point? And the desserts maybe that caught your eye so far today.
You know how college kids have like the white t-shirts and they put a tally mark on it every time they have a beer? That's been me with plates today. If that tells you anything, I've been all about every time I get some room in my stomach. Now, granted, there's been a couple of chocolate pie revisits. It hadn't just been straight up plates of the good stuff. But yeah, I've been indulging quite a bit. I'll put it that way.
So, how many rounds did you have to make today? Were you just in one spot all day? Were you able to do that, or did you have multiple stops to make, or were you in one spot and you had multiple crews that came in and out?
Just one spot. Yeah, our main Thanksgiving is going to be tomorrow night. My brother's
Okay.
going to be able to come into town, and we'll get the. It was weird. This was kind of supposed to be like the immediate family, and then it just kept growing. And then it became kind of like a part one for a two-part family get together, which is awesome. Typically, you see, all your family and stuff, and you got to tell them bye, and then it's okay. I guess I'll see them in a month or so when Christmas rolls around, but it's going to be 24 hours later, pretty much. But
We
I will say I respect the people who have to make multiple stops because I mean I can only imagine how much food they have to eat in a day to keep everybody appeased.
we took on hostess type mode for 2 rounds today. We
Two
had a
different.
brunch round at about mid morning, folks over, family over, and then we had a round two at around 2:30. So Heather Reier, she's the real MVP, man. Just a tremendous performance as we move through this Thanksgiving Day. And I'm kind of with you. If the tryptophan from the turkey doesn't put me to sleep tonight, this Ole Miss Mississippi State game might do it. This Egg Bowl might do it, Clint, because Mississippi State just missed a field goal to tie the game at 3 late here in the second quarter in Starkville. So it looks like Ole Miss is going to go to the half 3-0. Not a lot in the way of fireworks so far in that
Uh, I wonder what I didn't check the over under on this game, but I'm guessing they're not on pace to break it.
they're not going over the first half. I think we know that right now. And really, for Ole Miss, this is kind of a continuation from last week. You wonder just how much this late season uh, rush is taken out of them. The Georgia game obviously didn't go according to plan. It almost felt like as that game moved along, you saw that team sort of dissipate in some ways. Got off to a slow start last week against La Monroe, and not exactly putting up big numbers against this Mississippi State defense. Fortunately for Pete Golding and Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, boy, Mississippi State offensively right now, just a mess. Even with Will Rogers back in there at quarterback, he's coming off an injury. Still looks like he might be dealing with some issues, and this state offense is tough to watch right now.
Well, I was looking forward to this game all day. And granted, I mean, it's been close. So I figured that it would be. There were a lot of people out there. There were some people picking Mississippi State to cover that. I think it was a 10-point line or something like that. Um, I figured it would be close, but I wasn't expecting 3-0 at halftime. I was expecting a couple of more fireworks, but hopefully some things get going in the second half. I will say, Georgia putting that beating on Ole Miss, it seems to have carried over at least a couple of weeks. So we'll see if they're able to get things back on track.
It's kind of like what Alabama's done to teams in the past, right?
Yes.
It can have that lingering effect, and especially on a team like Ole Miss in November. That's the thing. Alabama saw a different Ole Miss team too earlier in the season, a team that was still whole, wasn't feeling the effects maybe as much. Now, I think Ole Miss, even going to that Alabama game, had a couple of injuries that it was dealing with. But boy, the cumulative effects of an SEC season for a team like Ole Miss, where depth is always going to be a concern to begin with, and then you start mixing in now Texas and Oklahoma starting next year for some of these teams. It's going to become even tougher. You got to think. Mimi S checking in here in the comments. Good to have you, Mimi, on board with us. Tex Tider, howdy, boys. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Tex. Very thankful on this Thanksgiving, as you might expect, as we talked about. Able to enjoy family, able to enjoy our friends at Bama Online tonight. And you know who wants to get right to it, Clint? Is Speed RTR,
Can
who
always count
asked
on
the
Speed.
pressing question. Let's get right into it. Enough of the Thanksgiving talk, enough of the Egg Bowl. Can Alabama ever break the hysteria of Jordan Hare games? Ever? Clint, can it ever happen? I guess in 2011 it happened pretty good. That's the one year I recall where Alabama went down there with the better team and really took it to the Tigers. I think that was like a 42-14 game. I guess if you go back to 2001, Alabama went down there with Dennis Francione, if you want to go that far back, and really put it to or 99, I guess. Was it 99? Yeah. Yes, I guess so. I'm getting my years mixed up. But yeah, there's been a few occasions where the Alabama's gone down there and taken care of business. 2001 was one of those years too. I think 99 Alabama had to really battle in that SEC championship season. 2001 went down there and won, I believe, 31-7 with Andrew Zal having a big game. But will it be that kind of game, Clint? I guess is what we're trying to get to here, in your opinion.
My question, are we ever going to see Alabama play another game in Jordan Hare Stadium where the kick six isn't run 37 times in a row on ESPN and all these other channels? I feel like this entire week, anytime you turn the TV on, anytime they're talking about the Iron Bowl, a highlight that they're showing is going to be the kick six. So my question would be, are we ever going to see a time where that play is not all over our screens when we're leading up to the Iron Bowl?
I think outside of even our vacuum that we work within, it is just one of those plays in college football history.
Legendary.
It's up there with the band on the field with Stanford and Cal. We still see that one all these years later. John Elway was playing at Stanford at the time. John Elway's probably 60 years old now, early 60s, and we still see that one. Unfortunately for Alabama fans, I think with where that game sort of sits in college football lore, and even this time around, it's the 10-year anniversary. So you kind of expect that. But no, to answer your question, I don't think there will ever come a time where it's not prominently promoted, especially in advance of a game played down on the plain. So when we think about this game, I know you and Jimmy have outlined it. I know I've outlined it. I've outlined it with Tim. I don't know how much more there is to talk to. I guess it comes down to just some key points when you look at this game. And for me, the Alabama defense is what I keep going back to, but it's also the Alabama offense of late that has gotten off to good starts in some games, and especially on the road at Kentucky, converting third downs, red zone opportunities, been very good and getting into the end zone in those situations. But I think the Alabama defense against that Auburn offense, and just the question I continue to have for Auburn is, where are the explosive plays going to come from if Alabama does a good job on Jarquez Hunter?
And Fairweather's been a good tight end. He's been a good weapon for them in the passing game. But other than him, there's just been such a lack of consistency from their weapons. And then with Peyton Thorne, he's got his own problems with consistency. And so just from an offensive standpoint as a whole, I mean, the offensive line, I would say it's probably improved compared to the last couple of years, but it hadn't improved to a point where it can mask a lot of the issues that you've seen from Auburn. And so you got to wonder, I mean, where do the plays come from? Where do the points come from? And I mean, that's, with Alabama's offense, the defense, is going to travel well, more than likely. I'm not saying that they, Auburn won't have some wrinkles. It could catch Alabama off guard. You might see an explosive play or two, something different, some new looks. But you expect or trust the defense to be able to do what it needs to do to win this football game. the offense has been earning that trust more and more every single week. I mean, you see it against LSU, but then you say, okay, it's LSU's defense. Can you go on the road against Kentucky and have similar success? They are able to do that. And then the next week, it's like, okay, it's UT Chattanooga, but it's an 11 a.m. kickoff. You're a 44.5 point favorite. Can you come out focused, ready to play some football? They were able to do that. So they've been really answering the call. And earlier in the year, they were really struggling to start games. As of late, they've kind of been starting hot and doing some really good things from pretty much, the opening play. And so this is yet another challenge that I would say from a talent standpoint, Kentucky and Auburn defensively aren't too far off. But I think Jordan Hare Stadium being at 2:30, that crowd should be a little bit more lively. Fourth quarter, sun starts going down. That place can really start to get rocking if things are closed for whatever reason. And the fact that just the rivalry factor that's involved with it. I mean, it's another challenge for this offense, but if they can overcome that and they continue to play the kind of football to the level that they have the last few weeks, you got to feel good about their chances even going into the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and playing Georgia next weekend.
Yeah, and I get it. I understand the concern for Alabama fans with things that have happened down in Jordan Hare in the past. But even in most of those wins that Auburn had in those type of games, Auburn, to me, at least in one critical area, had an advantage. And where I come up a little bit short on thinking that this could be one of those games is I don't see that for this Auburn team. Even before last Saturday, when Auburn was on the 3-game win streak in the SEC, and I started counting it up. What's the win-loss record of these three teams? What's the win-loss record of Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and Arkansas? Well, right now it's 2-19. And when you think about this weekend's games, Vanderbilt at Tennessee, it goes to 2-20. You think about Arkansas hosting Missouri tomorrow afternoon, probably 2-21. Mississippi State tonight down 3-0 at the half. Could be 2-22, the combined SEC record for the three teams that Auburn has beaten in the Southeastern Conference to this point of the season. And Timothy Hooper here in the comments. Hopefully Deontay Lawson will be back. I thought the update from Nick Saban Wednesday sounded pretty promising. What about you, Clint?
Same, yeah. It's for him and for Jalen Key. I mean, I don't know for certain that they're going to be available, but you would think that they're going to, and that certainly bodes well. Being even a week further out from the SEC championship, if they're able to get back on the field this weekend, get some snaps under their belts, maybe it's a full-time workload, maybe there's some limitations, but I doubt it. I think if they're going to play, they're going to play. But that should be able to kind of get them back in game shape. It's not like they've been out long enough where that would be a major concern, anyways. But it could allow them to knock any rust off. But with Deontay Lawson, I will say, I feel like he came back from that first injury and he wasn't quite the same player. Like you could tell he still wasn't 100%. And I highly doubt if he plays on Saturday, he's going to be 100%. This might be a situation where he's never really 100% for the rest of the year. But, a 75, 80, 85%, or maybe 90%, ceiling there, maybe. I still think that version of Deontay is one of the better linebackers in the country. So that's certainly going to impact things. And then when you get Devontae Smith back in the secondary last week, I thought that was encouraging what he was able to do and the snaps that he was able to play. If you can get Jalen Key back as well, now the depth of that back half of your defense is in really good shape going into the SEC championship. And, that's something that's been, that's going to be pretty key because Georgia's passing attack with Carson Beck has been extremely underrated.
Oh, it has. And, there's some things that you might tweak a little bit in your packages in your secondary before you see Brock Bowers and that Georgia passing attack, because you have to still account for some guys on the outside like Lad McConkey and, the way they're able to use an assortment of guys in this offense compared to maybe the last few years, in addition to Brock Bowers. So you can maybe shuffle some things around at star, maybe your sub packages. You look to do some things a little bit different. You were able to work some different combinations last week against Chattanooga for sure. And with that, let's welcome on board Jimmy Stein. There he is. Jimmy Stein checking in with us here on Thursday night Tide. And Jimmy, I asked Clint Lamb, you got a plate count for us from today? At this
Three.
point. 3. Okay.
That's
Three.
manageable. That's respectable.
3 squares.
I didn't know we were showing the kind of discipline. If I'd have known that, I would have, withheld a couple of mine.
Now, how many desserts, or did you include a dessert on each of those plates?
The third plate was mostly desserts. I had a hard time choosing which one I wanted, so I would say the 3 plates were pretty full. The second plate was a real shock. I think I had just as much on the second plate as I did on the first. So third plate, all desserts because I couldn't choose, and it was a good day. It was a good day. I knew that I've not been hungry at all tonight. That shows how I overdid lunch. I've not been hungry since 2 o'clock, and probably won't be until tomorrow afternoon. It was pretty ridiculous.
Well, we don't have any Thanksgiving plate specials on the show tonight, but we do have that YouTube special that you can see at the bottom of the screen there. YouTube special for new subscribers to BamaOnline.com. If you enter code UA1, you're going to get 2 months of BOL for just $1. That is the YouTube special. So enter that code if you're a new subscriber. UA1, you're going to get 2 months, not 1, 2 months of BOL for just $1. And there's a rousing welcome for Jimmy Stein right there from Tex Tider. I asked the question to Clint Lamb just a minute ago. Jimmy, I'm going to ask you. We've seen Auburn win games against Alabama down at Jordan-Hare Stadium. That's nothing out of the blue. Even in the Nick Saban era, we've seen that on multiple occasions. But it seems to me like in a lot of those, if not all of those, you went into one of those or all of those matchups thinking, you know what, Auburn's got an edge maybe in a critical area. Tell me one area, or give me an area where you think that might be the case, or is it not the case that you can see going into this one?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say they have the edge anywhere, but I would say they are good in spots. And I'll tell you where they're very good is cornerback. I think both of the corners, and as I say that, both corners were invited to the Senior Bowl this week. DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett will both be in the Senior Bowl, and they don't necessarily do favors for in-state players. I mean, you pretty much have to earn your way to the Senior Bowl. So that shows how good they are. Also shows how good Alabama is, because I'm not trading Alabama's for theirs, even though they have 2 NFL-ready Senior Bowl corners. But they are good at corner, and I think they're good enough guys to where I don't necessarily anticipate Jermaine Burton or let's say Malik Benson or Ja'Cory Brooks if he plays. Alabama's outside receivers getting just a free release all day. I think Alabama's receivers are going to have to earn their yardage against those Auburn corners. I don't know that that's the strength of their team, but it might be. I just think personnel-wise, when I'm looking for, okay, who's a pro football player and who's ready for pro football player, those corners stand out to me. But I say that and admit that as good as they are, I don't think they're quite McKinstry and Arnold.
Yeah, those are a couple of guys going into the season. You felt like for that Auburn defense that was in sort of rebuild mode, that's where it was going to have to start. And they seem to have performed as expected during the 2023 season. I'll say this too. You don't want to go down there with an apprehensive quarterback, put it that way. And what I see from Jalen Milroe right now, guys, is a guy that I don't know how well he'll play Saturday, but I feel pretty confident that rat trap aren't a couple of words that we'll hear from Nick Saban in the post game when it comes to describing the approach of Jalen Milroe on Saturday. I just feel like this guy's confidence right now is at an extreme level. And even when probably the rest of us, Clint, thought it shouldn't be at a high level, I'm not sure if he still didn't think that, no, this is fine. I can handle this. And he has proven to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's watching his growth. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence. In fact, I know it's not a coincidence that as he's grown, Alabama's offense has grown and the team has grown. Just his confidence, it's a representation of really everybody. Like, he's playing good football right now. And what I saw against UT Chattanooga, granted, I understand the opponent, but he seemed like he had a better understanding for the big picture kind of stuff. He understood where he wanted to go with the football. He saw things open. He's working through his progressions a little bit more. It doesn't have to be, a first read necessarily all the time. Obviously, you do some things to try to help him as much as possible. I don't think you want him dropping back. I mean, obviously, you hadn't been in the last several weeks where he's just a pure drop back passer and you're, asking him to be Peyton Manning back there. But I think he can do a little bit more of that. I think, just his confidence as a runner, just being able to move the sticks and have success, whether it be through the air or on the ground, that's going to cause you to be a lot more confident. And you just see a guy who is playing his best football right now. And will Saturday be one of his tougher challenges so far this year? Absolutely. 2 of the 3 starts that he's had on the road, he's thrown an interception in his last 2 SEC games, but he's been able to respond from both of those. And that's got to be encouraging as well. Like if Auburn's able to bait him into something and you see him kind of, make one of those kind of throws that you see from him every once in a while, they're becoming a lot more few and far between, but where it's like, man, I don't know really what you saw there. But when he makes those mistakes, it's his ability to bounce back that you have to feel confident in. So I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's a coincidence that as his confidence has grown and his play has improved and he's gotten more comfortable, this entire Alabama team's a lot more confident and comfortable as well.
Jimmy, how much do you think improved protection has played into that? It just seems like this stew of Alabama offense has tasted a lot better as more and more elements have seemingly come together in the last month or so. It's been almost this perfect marriage of the things you have to do well on offense to have success, that taking place.
I'll tell you a real common error, common mistake, or common thing you see out of young, inexperienced college quarterbacks is when the protection's not good and they're sort of get used to, okay, as soon as the ball is snapped, I'm going to get some pressure from somewhere. Those quarterbacks tend to stare at the rush because they worry about that first because they know, okay, this is coming, and it gets in their heads. But Alabama's protection has improved to the point that I think Jalen Milroe, as he's developing and sort of shedding the inexperience label as the season has gone on, he never really got into that. I mean, I don't think Milroe has ever, I don't think I can recall even a time where I felt this season, despite all the sacks Alabama was giving up in September and October, that it was Milroe being so rush conscious. He was staring at the rush. I think this kid has a good ability to keep his eyes downfield, which is why he made so many plays down the field, even in September and October when the sack numbers were high. So I think as the protection has improved, Jalen Milroe, who already was, even while the protection was bad, was doing a good job of keeping his eyes downfield. I think it's helped him sort of skip levels. And by that, I mean, it almost feels like guys like he went from inexperienced to veteran to veteran. I mean, in terms of the plays that he's made the last 2 or 3 weeks, where we have seen him use his eyes to manipulate safeties. Against Kentucky, the first 2 touchdown passes were to his second read. This was stuff he just wasn't doing in September, and he wouldn't be able to do it now if that protection wasn't better. I think it's all gone hand in hand, and the protection has been so good lately that Jalen Milroe is sort of turning the corner from inexperienced, least experienced quarterback in the SEC to playing like a veteran playmaker.
Yeah, you're seeing him graduate from some 100 level quarterback play earlier in the season to 200 to maybe even 300 in some aspects. Things like helping his offensive tackles by taking that little half skip or hop up into the pocket. That helps. And that provides him with more time and allows for routes to open up. But man, when they have time and he has time, the protection's been what it's been. Those deep over routes that they like to run to the tight ends and the wide receivers, those are staples of any Alabama offense, not just this one, not just ones we've seen in previous years. And they have made that look pretty easy here of late. So, we've got a question here in the comments. Do we think Jalen will have more passing touchdowns on Saturday are rushing touchdowns on Saturday. Alabama with 15 rushing touchdowns in the last 3 games. Obviously, Jalen's had a lot to do with that. He's had a lot to do with obviously the passing touchdowns too. So when you look at this Alabama offense for this game, Clint, we'll start with you. Where do you think Jalen and the offense in general is most likely to have success?
I mean, obviously Auburn's pass defense has been better than their run defense. And I mean, when you look at it, I know Jackson Dart had a couple of rushing touchdowns. KJ Jefferson had 50 yards rushing. I just was able to check on that. So you've seen dual threat quarterbacks have some success against their defense. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ended up having more rushing touchdowns, because in these type of environments, you would, even though he's grown a ton as a passer, I still think it's kind of like, Arkansas last year, where the lead starts dwindling a little bit and you need him to make plays in a hostile road environment. He's most comfortable as a runner. And I understand that there for a while he wasn't really willing to run. So that makes you question, is he really comfortable doing that? But to me, he's been at his best when he's been able to rely on his legs and turn to that when things break down. And whether it be Kentucky, whether it be, obviously it wasn't needed very much against UT Chattanooga, but Kentucky in particular, there was a lot of occasions where he was willing to tuck the football and kind of even run early when things weren't there. I think in this type of environment, you probably see a lot more of that. And I think he has a lot of success. Auburn's defense has not been great as far as stopping the run. Pass defense has been a little bit better. I do think that it's not to a point where Alabama won't have success through the air. But, it's not LSU's defense and the way that they're going to play them with those corners where they're so far off the ball, they're going to pretty much give you stuff all night. They're going to give you some opportunities downfield. They're going to give you some of that short to intermediate stuff at times as well. And so I think he's going to have success as a passer. But this offense, I think, running the football, whether it be with the running backs or with Jalen Milroe, I think they should be able to have success. They've improved as a run blocking unit. The offensive line, Caden Proctor in particular, obviously Jaden Roberts being inserted into the starting lineup has made a worlds of difference for, that, aspect. But just Caden Proctor's improvement, I think he has shown improvement as a pass protector, but really it's been his run blocking and the fact that Alabama can have more success on early downs where teams can't just pin their ears back and get after Jalen Milroe in obvious passing situations quite as much as they could earlier in the year. I think that's been the biggest difference maker for this offense, and I fully expect going on the road, that's kind of what you want your offense to do, is be able to control the line of scrimmage, control the tempo and the clock and the pacing of the game. And so I think that Alabama's rushing offense should have some success, and I think that Jalen Milroe is probably going to be a big part of that.
New Mexico State last week threw 3 touchdown passes. Diego Pavia, that quarterback for New Mexico State, threw for over 203 scores, and he also ran for 35. He's a gritty little dude, tough guy, fun to watch at the quarterback position. But, we talk about those 15 rushing touchdowns for Alabama in the last 3 games. 11 of those have come in the red zone. So if you're wondering how an offense converts 18 straight trips into the red zone, into the end zone for touchdowns, running the football like that will get the trick done. And, I'm big on who you did it against too. So you got to temper some of that, especially from last week where Chattanooga is concerned. But the same thing can be said about Auburn, Jimmy. I look at Auburn, Tigers have given up just 1 rushing score in their last 4 games. But when you think about those last 4 games, Mississippi State, I go back to Vanderbilt, I go back to Arkansas. When you talk about rushing touchdowns in the SEC right now, those 3 teams rank at the very bottom of the conference.
Right. It seems to me that Auburn's had most of its success running the ball with their quarterbacks, who shouldn't be as explosive and as playmaking as perhaps a Jarquez Hunter or their other scholarship running backs. But when I think of Auburn running the ball this season and making plays, I think of Peyton Thorne sort of surprising me with his legs at times. We know Robbie Ashford is a threat with his legs. He had a big game with his legs against Alabama a year ago.
You think we see Ashford Saturday?
Well,
I do.
I do.
I think Alabama should see him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's for that reason. I think Auburn's best chance at the big play, moving the ball, chunk plays, is with quarterback runs. And that's what worked against Georgia to an extent, kept Auburn in the game. So I can see Auburn coming into the game with a heavy dose of QB runs. But if you're going to do the whole game with Peyton Thorne, is he really going to survive a 2022 touch game where Peyton Thorne is tackled 20 to 22 times by the Alabama defense? That doesn't sound like a good idea. So I think that they go in with the idea that we're going to run the quarterback quite a bit. So we're going to play both quarterbacks because we're not going to subject one or the other to 20 plus hits. Maybe 10 plus hits a piece sounds better to them. So yeah, I think quarterback runs will be a huge part of what they do, and that we will see Ashford specifically because of that.
Hey, Clint, we're going to let you dip, let you get back to that next plate that we know you've got just off camera here.
You know me too well.
We can't see it, but
I've been thinking about it this entire time we've been talking, if I'm speaking candidly.
We have smell-o-vision at this point. No, Clint, we appreciate it as always, man. Great work with us as always at BamaOnline.com. Look forward to catching up again next week.
Absolutely, fellas. Good talking to you guys. Should be a fun game, and then we got next week. So it's going to be a fun next couple of weeks.
Stakes just go up and up and up. Thanks, Clint.
See you guys.
Yeah, I think as we talk about the Auburn offense and the potential for the runs, even last week, Jimmy, it was a situation where Thorne had 17 carries against New Mexico State. Now, 4 of those were sacks,
Right.
but New Mexico State even did a pretty good job with a 4-man pass rush of making Thorne move and reset and do things that he didn't want to do on some dropbacks. So I think that's problematic for the Tigers too, especially if Jarquez Hunter throws up another 8 for 27 like he did last week. And again, that 3-game winning streak, you talk about that stretch for Auburn. And through there, Hunter was Hunter. He had 3 100-yard games. So that's why I think it's just imperative for Alabama defensively to account for him, limit those explosive runs. You're right. Thorne will surprise you, I think, as much with his maneuverability in the pocket and his ability to kind of escape pressure. He's not going to hit you for 50, 60, 70-yard runs, but he can do enough to keep plays alive and put stress on the defense that way. But early downs and, Alabama going to be in that nickel package, although we'll see some two tights maybe occasionally from Auburn. And even from that, though, I think Alabama probably stays in the nickel until I don't think Alabama gets out of the nickel in the face of 2 tight ends against just about anybody anymore until that offense shows they can run them out of it.
That's right. Yeah, Peyton Thorne has surprised me a little bit because I saw him play at Michigan State a few times. I don't watch multiple Michigan State games per year, but I see him. And I remember Peyton Thorne being a competent passer, but I didn't remember him as athletic as he's shown at Auburn. So for those Alabama fans listening that haven't watched a lot of Auburn, you might be a little surprised at how twitchy Peyton Thorne is. Again, not Milroe, not even Robbie Ashford, but yeah, he can make plays with his legs, no doubt about it. And Ashford, as we know, can. I thought Alabama a year ago, Travis, as sort of embarrassing maybe as the defensive performance was against Tennessee. I was not pleased with Alabama's effort defending the run against Auburn a year ago, giving up, I think, a whopping 320 yards. I thought, goodness, I mean, against that group to give up 320. And I assume Auburn is going to come into this game Saturday thinking, hey, if we get 320 on the ground again at home, this may turn out really well for us. And to me, it just starts with defending that QB run, because that's where they had success. I don't think Jarquez Hunter is going to have a 200-yard game against Alabama. I really don't. Now, he's capable, of course, of big-time things. But if Auburn has a lot of success on the ground, I'm expecting a big chunk of it to come from Peyton Thorne and Robbie Ashford.
Yeah, they hit Hunter on some outside zones against Alabama last year. He ended up with like 134 on 11. So I would expect perimeter runs early and then maybe the quarterback keeping off of that. I don't see Alabama blitzing probably a lot in this game. And Alabama typically maybe more simulated pressures than numbers we see from the Alabama defense, because they have a front four that has grown into a really good pass rushing group. And The only touchdown I saw from Auburn against New Mexico State last week, New Mexico State brought, I think, 6, and Thorne hit Fairweather in the middle of the field for a blitz beater for a touchdown. So, again, it's not like Alabama needs to be anything that it isn't going into this game. I'm sure there'll be some special things they have in store defensively for this Auburn offense, but I think as much as anything, that player for player, there's such an edge there that they shouldn't have to be too exotic.
Yeah, sound football. Play sound assignment football. I think Alabama goes into this game with a pretty big talent advantage. I think McKinstry and Terrion Arnold can sort of remove Auburn's outside receivers from being much of a threat in the game with just man coverage. Allows you to be aggressive in the other areas, but you don't necessarily have to blitz. As you said, I think you're sort of making it more difficult than you need to. I think it's just playing sound assignment football, playing a lot of man coverage, and just not allowing Jarquez Hunter, Thorne, or Ashford to break, contain, and make a big chunk play. Just keep it in front of you, force them to stack first downs, and I think Auburn will spend most of the day punting.
Yeah, could be. Absolutely could be. Afro Man Davis checking in here in the comments. Need Otis, Boygby, and Smith to be ferocious in the way they play this weekend. And that's something worth noting, too, about that Iron Bowl a year ago. Alabama in that nickel, when it plays a Boygby at that 5 technique with Dallas Turner or Chris Braswell on the other side, it's a lot harder to run those outside zones against into a Boygby than it was probably at this time a year ago when you did not have him. You didn't have him in this game last season. So Dean Cloud just wants to know a simple answer to this one. How many interceptions for Alabama on Saturday? I think that even goes back to the job you do on the Auburn run game, because if you do the job there, then obviously you're going to get Thorne into some elevated pass attempts. I'll say this for him too. He wasn't the problem for Auburn last week. If you go back and watch that game against New Mexico State, every position around him for the most part, starting with the offensive line, really failed him. I mean, you look at his numbers, I think he was 15 of 19, very efficient, got a lot of pressure. So again, if you can get those attempts up, well, obviously that bodes well for some guys on the back end for Alabama.
Yeah, I think Thorne's one of their better players, to be honest, on offense. I know the numbers don't necessarily jump off the page at you, but I think if you look at the 11, 12, 13 guys that they play most often on offense, Peyton Thorne's probably one of their better players. But he hasn't thrown a ton of interceptions. Alabama hasn't racked up a ton of interceptions. So I'll answer Dean's question and say my best guess is one. I think one. And in terms of where it would come from, maybe one of those corners. I think they're going to blanket the receivers pretty well. So let's go with Kool-Aid, who had a big play in the end zone. Jordan Hare, as a freshman in the overtime period, made a big play out. So how about give Kool-Aid one more big play at Jordan Hare on Saturday, and he gets the interception. Won't take an avalanche of turnovers, I think, for Alabama to find some points here. But if they can steal the ball a time or so, make another big play on special teams like they did last week, and just give the offense a little bit of help, I think they could make this game uncomfortable for Auburn fans in a hurry.
Here's a question we've got from Speed RTR here in the comments. Could we see someone other than either Lawson or Campbell spying the quarterback? Malachi Moore, maybe. And I want to talk about this more from the perspective of Deontay Lawson, Jimmy, and his status for this week and what he may or may not be able to do in this game. And even if he starts and even if he gives it a go and you pair him with Jahad Campbell, when it gets to 3rd and long and you get the dime package out there, could you envision maybe just for this week until you know that Deontay's all the way back? And if he's all the way back, he's the guy all 3 downs. But if there's question about that, would you feel comfortable with Jahad Campbell being the guy that stays out there in the dime? And maybe Deontay this week, you get a couple of downs, first, second down out of him in the nickel, and then if you do go to dime, it's Jihad Campbell that you leave out there.
Well, Jihad is still kind of a young player, but hey, we're in game 12 now, and he should be getting it, and I think that's mentally is the ask. I don't think it's the physical part at all with Jihad. I think physically he's capable of anything you would ask an off-ball linebacker. I think it's just the mental part, knowing the assignments, knowing where he needs to be. That gets a little more complicated in dime because there's so many moving parts, and Auburn will have so many eligible receivers in the route, and Jihad's gonna be responsible for some of that if he's the one still out there. I'd also say Trez Marshall is a guy that we could also see in some important roles down the stretch, and one thing he brings to the table is being assignment sound. Maybe not honestly as physically gifted as a healthy Lawson or certainly a Jihad Campbell, but Trez knows his stuff. I'm sure he knows multiple linebacker spots and roles, whether you're talking about regular nickel or dime. So Marshall's a guy we could see out there. The problem with using a safety as a spy, if you want to call Malachi a safety, sometimes in that star role, is if you assign a DB to the quarterback, now you're pretty naked on the back end. And maybe you can afford to be against Auburn. Maybe you can, but I just don't think it would be too sound to basically play Auburn with only 3 or 4 defensive backs because you got one of them assigned to the quarterback. I think Lawson, Campbell, and Trez Marshall all have the athleticism to play the spy game against Thorne and Ashford, who aren't necessarily as athletic as Jaden Daniels. But I think they could pull it off, and I do think that is something that's going to be asked of one of the inside backers, simply because I think it might be Auburn's go-to play or best chance at making a big play as the quarterback runs. So Alabama is going to have to expend some assets on defending that.
Yeah, and Fairweather being what he is at the tight end position, that Hugh and that staff's going to plan in a way in which they can possibly get some matchups on those inside linebackers too. And if they don't, hard to spy with a safety, because if it's not one of those inside linebackers, it's probably going to be one of those safeties, a sub package guy that's going to probably be involved with Auburn's top receiver, which is kind of crazy to say that Fairweather is Auburn's top guy. And yeah, I understand when it comes to explosiveness, on the outside, there's a guy or two. I mean, Javarius Johnson, he's had 220 receiving yards in his last 4 games on just 10 catches. So he's averaging about 22 yards per catch in his last 4 games. That's a guy you got to account for. And even Thorne, there was a stretch there, and this is the SEC's last ranked passing offense in Auburn. He's picked it up a little bit too of late. He's averaging more than 7.2 attempt in his last 4 of his last 5. So that's improved. But again, you have to take into account the competition that Alabama or that Auburn has seen of late. Gelato checking in. He just wants to go straight to next year. How about that, Jimmy? What do you guys think about getting Evan Stewart from Texas A&M? That rumbled across my social media timelines earlier in the week.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, first of all, unless something happened today while I was eating, which is very possible because I spent a lot of time eating, I don't think Evan Stewart's in the portal. Portal doesn't officially open until Monday after SEC championship game. Now I know that, and I'm not naive to how that happens.
I know.
And I know Travis is not either. I've seen what everybody else has seen. I would just say my opinion, and all it would be is an opinion. I wouldn't bet on it. Now, Evan may go in the portal. I don't know. He might. It's 2023. He might. I know this. If he does, I'm a big fan of his talent. If he goes in the portal, his agent is going to be a happy man because
this is going to be the next Keyshawn Booty situation, huh?
It could be. I'm going to say Evan Stewart's going to bring. He's going to be a rainmaker in the portal. I mean, everyone's going to want Evan Stewart, and I just don't tend to think Alabama when I think, okay, one of the one of the big name free agents is in the portal. He's, for instance, if this was baseball, Alabama would probably not be in the running for Shohei Ohtani. I mean, I don't think that's an Alabama thing to do. But in terms of talent, Evan Stewart is a great player. Anyone would like to have his talent on the roster. I would just lastly throw in that Alabama is going to return very possibly every receiver on the roster other than Jermaine Burton, who's more likely, I think, to go to the NFL, although he's got eligibility to return. But my guess is Burton moves on to the NFL. Everyone else could return. Bond, Prentice, Law, Corey Brooks will be healthy next season. They get Knobloch back. Jalen Hale is going to be that step you make between year 1 and 2 should excite everyone about Jalen Hale. And I think Bond is a guy that is in line. He made a good jump from year 1 to year 2. He can make another one in year 3 and be one of the better wide receivers in the U.S., in my opinion. So I don't look at wide receiver as a huge need for Alabama portal-wise, but hey, running back wasn't either, and they picked up Jahmyr Gibbs, and that worked out pretty good.
Sometimes you get surprised, too, by guys that leave, like Aaron Anderson in some other situations. So it all comes into play. But, yeah, still a little bit early probably to be maybe going that far with predictions on potential portal guys anyway. I know from a prediction standpoint as we get out of here, Jimmy, we're pretty close, I think, on the score for Saturday's game. I went 38-16. You're right around there, right?
Yeah, 34-13. So as usual, Travis, we were in the same neighborhood on predictions. We have been pretty much 12 straight games. We're in the area.
I think it's a game that, obviously a fast start benefits Alabama. Continuing what we saw at Kentucky, a start like we saw at say Mississippi State on the road. Even Texas A&M wasn't deplorable. But I still feel like even without that, it's a game Alabama could end up winning convincingly. Even if you get into the second quarter and it's a scoreless game, or Auburn even has a lead of some kind going into the second quarter. Again, that's not where you want to be in that place. I get it. You don't want to leave that crowd around as long as you have to. But a game that, as it plays out, I just continue to go back to the roster and the personnel advantage, and one that ultimately swings in Alabama's favor.
Yep, Alabama's got more good players than Auburn. And whenever I'm picking a game, I mean, I know that's super simplistic, right? But when I pick winners, whether it's an Alabama game or not, I'll start with this. Which team has the most good players? And,
I tend to go that way too.
I think you can ask even the most ardent Auburn supporter if he has just a modicum of objectivity, would tell you that Alabama's got the most good players in this game, and that's who I'm picking to win. I know strange things happen over there, but usually the best team wins this game, and I think we know who the best team is.
John Davis checking in as he's watching this Egg Bowl, as we all are. Watching this Egg Bowl reminds me how unpredictable these rivalry games can be sometimes. Mississippi State up 7-3 now in the third quarter. Looks like Ole Miss on the move, though. So still some football to play in Stark Vegas. We're going to get out of here, Jimmy. As always, appreciate you taking the time, you and Clint, especially on a Thanksgiving night. And like Clint, get back to that turkey, get back to that dressing. We don't call it stuffing in the South. It's dressing.
I tapped out.
You tapped out. You got plenty for tomorrow. Turkey sandwiches, turkey soup.
That's like the best part of Thanksgiving, almost is the leftover turkey sandwich situation. I'm a big fan of that. And yep, there'll be some pre-Iron Bowl Thanksgiving lunch too, I believe.
No leftovers for our subscribers at BamaOnline.com. Always fresh content for you right there at BOL. We hope you'll join us. And again, the YouTube special for new subscribers of BOL. If you enter UA1, you're going to get 2 months of BOL for just $1. Special for our YouTube fans right here. We appreciate you guys immensely. For Jimmy Stein, for Clint Lamb, Travis Reier, thanking you once again. And until next Thursday, so long, everybody.